Right, this is a small video on setting goals and objectives, and it's also about evaluating, teaching and learning. The learning objectives for this small video is to gain beginning competence in implementing goal-driven teaching and learning by using competence goal, knowledge and skills objectives, as well as your own learning objectives as the foundation for planning, carrying out teaching sequences and teaching courses. Also, you should gain a beginning competence in assessing learning by formulating, observing and documenting signs of learning. As you've seen in my teaching as well, there is a hierarchy. First we have the competence areas. If we look at the Danish national curriculum for English, we have 3 competence areas. We have oral communication, written communication, as well as culture and society. Each competence area for each stage the learners are at have an overall competence goal, and if you look into that, there are stages in there where there are certain knowledge and skills objectives, and finally we have the learning objectives that you decide. What are you specifically what do you want your students specifically to learn in this little teaching sequence or in this teaching course? If we talk about competence goal driven teaching, we have 4 stages or 4 steps. In step 1, you begin with assessing the learning potential of a group of students. What are they capable of doing now? What might their next zone of proximal development be for the class as well as for the individual student? In short, we're talking about assessment for learning at this stage, not assessment of learning. When you've established this, you have a good foundation for planning your next course by formulating learning objectives for the class as a whole. Step 2 is to actually formulate these learning objectives. Step 3, to create activities for your students, working towards your learning objectives, facilitating that they actually reach the learning objectives you set up for this teaching sequence or teaching course. Step 4 is to reflect upon and formulate what signs of learning do you want to focus on in order to assess the degree of fulfillment of your learning goals. Finally, you need to actually observe and document signs of learning. You could do that by using a teacher's logbook or student portfolios, student products, student activities. In student activities, you could actually observe how your student go about carrying out the activities. Here we have a model of competence goal-driven teaching. Again, step 1, evaluating learning potential. Step 2, setting learning objectives. Step 3, planning activities. Step 4, observing and documenting signs of learning, and then we start all over again. But now you also have the opportunity, having actually done one round, you'll have the opportunity of formulating individual learning goals together with the individual student as well. Here we have a small example. This is a first grade class. This is just before Christmas. The preconditions are that the students have been working with phrases for greetings. We are rounding off me and my family. They've learned actions and some adjectives for size and emotions, and they're moving on to the next topic, which is going to be about animals. In your pre-assessment, you've observed that the group knows many words for emotions, but they need practice. They need to practice them in a communicative context. So your learning objective here is the student should learn using words about emotions in a communicative context. So this is lesson 1. In your starter you do clusters, which you've tried with me. Play some music, and when the music stops you ask your students to carry out certain tasks. One of the tasks might be practicing greetings, or another task could be forming groups and using adjectives, placing the smallest one in the front, etc., etc. Then your students should listen and do the emotions in a small YouTube video clip. And then to practice those words in a communicative context, your students should do a cooperative learning structure, the inside-outside circle, with flashcards. So they should ask each other, how are you today? And their partner should say, I'm sad, or I'm happy, or then the partner should ask, how are you today? Next activity is a repetition of a little poem you've taught your students. It's called I'm Big, I'm Small. It's always important to repeat things many times with beginners. A post-activity might be to write and draw in the language notebook. Here you actually document. You have them write down some words, maybe make drawings to the words. So here you actually document how many words did the students learn. Finally, you round off by doing formative assessment. And one way, I'm going to show you the example in a minute, might be that you ask your students to place a name in the right category. And here's an example of how to do that. You do that in Smart Notes. So you create this little chart here, and then you ask your students to place their names according to where they think they are. I need some more practice, I'm almost there, or I can do it. So if you ask your students, you could also, if it's beginners, you might have pictures of your students, so they could place a picture in the appropriate column here. When they've all done that, then you can actually save this slide, and then again you have documentation for how did your students themselves assess what they were capable of doing. Another way of assessing your student might be to do a little log, a little teacher log. Here it's actually in Danish. The student understands the activity, the student is active and participates, the student is motivated for participating, the student can use words about emotions in a communicative context. And then you write very few notes here, maybe just symbols, maybe just a smiley or an OK or a minus or a plus or whatever. And it shouldn't, filling out this observation sheet should only take a couple of minutes just after your lesson has ended. And then you collect all these documentations in a folder or whatever you think, and then you'll have some documentation and you can actually follow the progress of your students. That was it. So thank you for your attention.